Welcome everyone. Today we will explore population growth, focusing on what influences whether population rise, stabilize, or decline. The key theme is that growth isn't indefinite. It is shaped by both density-dependent factors like competition and disease and density-independent factors like disasters or climate extremes. These forces interact to regulate ecosystems, ensuring populations doesn't spiral out of balance. Our journey will cover basic growth models, examples from nature, case studies, and conservation implications. By the end of this video, you will see how populations are dynamic, shaped by predictable biological pressures and unpredictable environment shocks. Let us start. The population growth, density dependent and density independent factors. As we have discussed in earlier lecture, a population is simply a group of individuals of the same species living in a given area. Population size changes constantly through four procedures: births, deaths, immigration, and immigration. If births and immigration outnumber deaths and immigration, the population grows. The opposite leads to decline, but growth is almost never limitless. Nature enforces limits that we'll explore. Understanding population dynamics helps explain fluctuations in wildlife, human communities, and ecosystems. From bacteria in petri dish to humans on Earth, populations are always in flux, constantly influenced by external conditions and internal competition. Studying population growth isn't just an academic exercise, it is practical and necessary. In ecology, it predicts how ecosystems remain balanced and resilient. In conservation, it helps to manage wildlife from preservation endangered species to preventing pest outbreaks. Human societies dependent on these studies too. Managing fisheries, agriculture, and natural resources require knowing the limits of growth. Moreover, understanding human population growth informs resources planning, food security, and climate policy. At its heart, population biology shows us the delicate balance between abundance and scarcity, teaching lessons to apply to both nature's survival strategies and humanity's long-term sustainability. Populations generally show two growth patterns. First is exponential and second is logistic. Exponential growth resembles a J-shaped curve where numbers explode under ideal unlimited conditions. Bacterial colonies in nutrient-rich media often demonstrate this rapid doubling. In contrast, logistic growth is more realistic in the natural world. It starts exponentially but slows as resources become limited, eventually stabilizing around the ecosystem's carrying capacity, that is K, producing the S-shaped curve. For example, deer herds in forests may initially boom until limited food and space prevent further expansion. These models illustrate nature's check on uncontrolled growth and set the stage for understanding limiting factors. Population size are not left unchecked. They are restrained by limiting factors. These are environmental features that slow or reduce growth. Crucially, limiting factors fall into two categories. First, density-dependent factors, which strengthen as population grows denser, like competition or disease. Second, density-independent factors such as hurricanes, or drought which strike population regardless of their density. Recognizing the distinction is vital. Integral pressures like overcrowding regulate gradually and predictably, while external shocks impose abrupt and indiscriminate change. Both sets of forces shape population stability, and combining predictable biological feedback with unpredictable environmental disturbances. Density-dependent factors are those whose impact intensifies as population density rises. They occur because individuals interact more tightly in crowded conditions, creating greater stress. For example, more bodies per area mean more competition for the same food, easier spread of disease, and greater vulnerability to predators. These factors are biotic, meaning they stem from living interaction within the ecosystem rather than external physical forces. The major mechanisms include competition, predation, disease, parasitism, and stress from overcrowding. Together, these mechanisms regulate populations from within, preventing indefinite growth and maintaining dynamic balance between species and their resources. Competition is one of the clearest density-dependent mechanisms. It can be intraspecific, that is within the same species like oak seedlings competing for light, or interspecific, that is between two species such as wolves and coyotes hunting similar prey. As population density rises, competition grows fiercer because resources, food, water, and territory, sunlight are finite. A famous case is the reindeer introduced to St. Matthew Island. Initially, the population exploded due to the abundant lichen population. However, as the number swelled, food ran out. The herd eventually crashed to almost nothing. This highlights how resource scarcity ensures that exponential growth cannot continue unchecked. Nature's way of enforcing limits. On the other side, predation is another classic density-dependent regulator. Predator and prey population often rise and fall in tandem, creating cycles. A well-documented example is the lynx and snowshoe hare population, which fluctuate every 10 years in Canada. When hare numbers expand, lynx thrive feeding easily, but soon overpredation and food limits drive hare number down, causing lynx population to follow. Prey rebounds as predation pressure eases and the cycle repeats. These oscillations show how predation stabilizes ecosystem, preventing prey overpopulation while sustaining predator number. This balance reduces resource exhaustion, highlights interdependence, and exemplifies nature's built-in population regulatory system. Disease is the another density dependent factor which becomes significant limiting factors under crowded condition. Pathogens spread more easily when individuals are in close contact, especially in dense population. In this drastically lower survival and reproduction rate in wildlife, avian influenza spreads rapidly in packed poultry farms, disseminating populations. Historically, human population density fueled pandemics like the 1918 influenza, which spread more quickly in cities. More recently, COVID-19 shows higher transmission rates in dense urban regions than rural ones. Disease not only reduces the number but also adds selective pressures, sometimes shifting population genetics by favoring resistant individuals. In ecosystems, diseases spread, regulate, and restructure community composition. Parasitism, while similar to disease, is distinct. Parasites don't usually kill outright but slowly weaken host. As population density rises, parasites move more easily between individuals. This results in lower energy reserves, reduced fertility, and higher mortality. A notable example is deer population heavily infested with ticks in areas of overabundance. At such density, parasites thrive, further weakens the crowded herds. Beyond wildlife, parasites influence agriculture and livestock, like dense cattle herds, for example, suffer from internal worm that spread easily, like disease parasitism. Parasitism shows how increasing contact density generates vulnerabilities, surviving as stable population breaks over time. Overcrowding doesn't just increase physical competition, it also causes psychological and physiological stress. Animals in densely packed conditions often display increased aggression, less parental care, and weakened immune responses and reduced fertility. For example, laboratory rats colonies placed under high density conditions show fighting, irregular mating, and high offspring mortality. In the wild, bird colonies may experience nest abandonment when overcrowded, lowering reproductive stress, hormonal change triggering by stress reduced overall population growth. Unlike external predators or parasites, overcrowding stress works internally, demonstrating how population pressure alone can undermine survival even before resource scarcity fully sets in. Putting together these density-dependent factors are internal checks on population growth. As density rises, so do pressure, competition limit resources, predators prevent imbalance, disease and parasites spread rapidly, and stress diminishes fitness. These mechanisms don't operate in isolation, they often overlap, reinforcing one another. For instance, overcrowding stress can make animals more susceptible to disease, while food competition may leave weaker individuals vulnerable to predation. In contrast to density-dependent mechanisms, density-independent factors impact population regardless of how small and large they are. These are usually abiotic forces, external shocks like natural disasters, extreme weather events, and human disruptions. Think of floods, earthquakes, droughts, volcanic eruptions, and even pollution. Such events strike irrespective of population density. A hurricane will devastate 50 birds in a colony just as thoroughly as 5,000. Density-independent factors include climate extremes like drought, reduced crop and water availability, severe weather like hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods sweep through population indiscriminately, wildfires rapidly destruction of habitats affect species especially regardless of numbers. Geological disasters like volcanic eruptions, earthquake may cause mortality. Human activity, mining, oil spills, air pollution, and deforestation damage the ecosystem universally. Let's talk about a case study about Mount St. Helens erupted catastrophically in 1980, instantly transforming its surrounding ecosystem. Thousands of animals from elk to salmon perished regardlessly of density. Recovery was not tied to population self-regulating but rather to recolonization, migration and new habitats forming after the eruption. The event demonstrated density-independent impact, the eruption didn't target overcrowded population, it obliterated all its path. Density-independent events abound globally. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated Gulf Coast fish, reducing species number indiscriminately. In Australia, bushfire in 2019 to 2020 killed millions of animals from koalas to reptiles, irrespective of local density. Similar droughts across sub-Saharan Africa affect both small and large communities of wildlife equally by reducing water and plant growth. Nuclear accidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima lead to human evacuations. Animals die of unrelated to population density. Comparing these two factor categories clarifies the distinct role. Density-dependent factors are internal, biotic, and predictable in their intensity growth with crowding. They prevent populations from exceeding carrying capacity by slowing growth. On the other hand, density-independent factors are external, abiotic, and unpredictable, hitting large and small populations equally. Think of it this way: dependent factors act like thermostat system regulating temperature gradually, while independent factors behave like lightning strikes, sudden disruption, often devastating. Humans are also subject to both factor types. Density-dependent factors show when disease spread more rapidly in cities than in rural areas. For example, COVID-19 starkly illustrated this. Food shortages and intense competition manifest as human centers grow. Meanwhile, density-independent factors like tsunamis in Indonesia or drought in Africa impact human population regardless of density. What makes human unique is technology, medicine, infrastructure, and disaster relief offset some limits through not all. With over 80 billion people in 2023, humans still mostly follow exponential growth curve, but environmental constraints and climate shocks increasingly highlights the reach of limiting factors. Conservation strategies require balancing both factors. For instance, overfishing, a density-dependent issue, combines with warming oceans, a density-independent issue, to stress marine population. Forest managers track crowded deer herds where competition and parasites reduce herd health, while simultaneously planning for wildfire that could wipe out entire ecosystem. Recognizing these dual pressure allow targeted management, mitigation, predictable outcomes like competition while preparing for unpredictable shocks like drought. Conservation programs thus operate not just to save species but to plan for resilience under both steady population feedback and sudden catastrophic density independent events. In conclusion, population growth is shaped by two powerful categories of limits, that is density dependent factors like competition, predation, disease, parasitism, and stress act as a predictable gradual regulator. They prevent population from overshooting resources. Density-independent factors such as disaster, weather extremes, and human interventions strike indiscriminately, often causing sudden resets. Together they form the yin and yang of population dynamics. Study internal controls balanced by unpredictable environmental shocks. Understanding both isn't just academic, it is essential for managing ecosystems, conserving biodiversity, and planning humanity's future. Population growth isn't indefinite, it is negotiated between survival strategies and environmental ever-changing conditions. I hope you like this lecture. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the video.